Great. I think we're ready to get going. So thank you everyone who's joined the webinar. I really appreciate you dialing in, and hopefully you can see the screen share and follow along. We've got quite a few folks joining us today. In terms of the panelists, this is Mrugesh Desai. I'm the VP of North America for Accedo. I'm based in Toronto, which is under some fairly heavy snowfall. But my fellow panelists are based in the US West Coast. So Mark and David, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Thanks, Mrugesh. Yeah, Mark Adams here. I am a VP North America for Jump, and we're suffering under it's nearly, I think, 70 degrees or something here right now, so it's completely fine. We're managing.
Hi, David Rondan. I'm a Chief Technology Officer for a company, Row 8. We're a transactional video on demand service.
Fantastic. I know we've also got some folks joining in from Europe, so appreciate you guys dialing in. It's a bit later in the day for you. So before we sort of jump into the meat of the webinar today, we'll start with a few introductions of the companies we represent. So I'll actually kick this off. So Accedo really is one of the world's leading video services company focused on designing and building OTT services. We do so for a plethora of different device platforms, whether that's mobile, tablet, 10-foot experiences, web, but also we've made recent forays into video use cases enabled through AR and VR as examples. So you name the screen, and essentially we've deployed or are deploying video experiences for it. We're doing so at a fairly large scale. So today our Accedo One user experience product platform is supporting over 400 million connected devices around the world. And that spanned almost 80 billion API calls in 2018 alone. So we're supporting all types of different OTT services, whether that's broadcasters, pay TV operators, greenfield OTT services, and across every type of content vertical, be it news, sports, entertainment, lifestyle brands, and others. In terms of our DNA, Accedo truly believes in building native and performant experiences for the different device platforms out there. But we know that building a robust OTT experience is really about the sum of the parts. There's many different integrations that Accedo needs to integrate against, whether it's authentication and entitlements, but then also other aspects of monetization, such as ad serving. Data is obviously going to be the hot topic today, and we want to ensure that we're able to translate data collected across all these different integration verticals across to our B2B customers. And from there, of course, the discussion is really around what they can do with it. But even though we're very much focused on the user experience, and our platform enables fantastic premium experiences around every device form factor, it is important for us to have a very holistic understanding of the video ecosystem. And really what's powering a lot of our different customers is our Accedo One product platform. So we have announced at IBC a couple of months ago a revamped Accedo One, which has a number of different layers, which I won't really get into today. But of course, we have the front-end applications, but the use of data through our business intelligence built in on the platform and enabled through partners such as Jump is very important to the success of our customers. And we also have a burgeoning marketplace whereby different video ecosystem partners will be able to integrate against our platform. With that, I'll actually turn it over to Jump TV and Mark Adams.
Thanks, Mrugesh. Okay, let's get going. So Jump is a business data platform for the OTT video industry. At our core, we're an AI and machine learning business. Data informs everything we do. But essentially we drive video outcomes for people who run over-the-top subscription and PVOD, OVOD services, primarily through a couple of different aspects. Increasing conversion retaining the customers you've got, which is super important. Once you've spent a lot of money getting them, you need to retain them and keep them for as long as you can, hence the customer lifetime value. And also managing the effectiveness of your marketing campaigns. All the effort that you're doing into retaining and keeping those customers has to be tied back to the marketing campaigns, and we can help with that. We have a lot of, like I said, we have a lot of AI and machine learning models, but they're really about driving 4 different outcomes or providing 4 different models. One is converting your users, like not only looking at historical data, but making predictions about what and how and when they're going to convert using the marketing campaigns that you've put out into the marketplace. The second is churn. Churn is probably the biggest issue facing OTT operators right now. You can have churn rates of up to 30%, 50%. I know, the headline numbers for Disney Plus, for example, in November, they signed up 24 million, I guess, trial users. How many of those will convert and how many will they be left with by the end of December, say? And just corollary to that, Netflix apparently has lost 1 million subscribers in the last month. Thirdly, the customer lifetime value. So predicting, once I've got that customer, if I can keep them on for an extra month, times 10 million subscribers, that's hugely impactful to my bottom line. And then looking at the segments, really understanding the cohorts in my business in terms of customers, how they arrange by genre type, platform, content usage, and so on. Ultimately, people talk a lot about AI, but it really comes down to how does it impact my business? What's the business outcome? And we've been doing this for around 3 years and have got some great real world statistics of how we've been able to impact people's businesses. 20 to 30% increased conversion rate, 15 to 30% churn rate, which is just massive. Increasing the CLV over 10 to 15%, and up to 50% of marketing effectiveness improvement. These are huge ROIs, and it's really driven by our topic today, which is data. We'll go to the next. Just a quick look under the hood of how it works. I mean, essentially, we're taking data from a number of different sources, front end and back end. We have what we call a data lake, which we use to normalize and optimize raw unstructured data from different sources. And then we apply our machine learning models to it for each of the different modules. And the output to that is a business-friendly dashboard that marketing and product teams can use to actually make marketing decisions and understand more about their customers than they would have otherwise. You don't have to be a data scientist to use our product. That's really important that we have a really broad user base. But the insights are really powerful and they can really impact your business. So from here, I'd like to hand over to David from Row 8.
Hey guys, so let me just start with giving you a little more of a take on what Row 8 is. So we are a bit of a unicorn in the marketplace. We launched as a transactional service. Most of the video services now launching OTT are either subscription or advertise, AVOD. This presents a couple of challenges, which I'll get into, but we're subscription free, direct to consumer. We're on a number of platforms. We try to come up with some very innovative pricing programs to try to get people to transact in off-peak hours, including a satisfaction guarantee. You start watching a movie within, you don't like it within 30 minutes, you can swap it out for another rental, kind of on the same occasion. You don't like your steak, send it back to the kitchen, we'll send you out a new one. And we believe we worked closely with Accedo to deliver a streamlined interface. We think we have one of the most compelling interfaces out there from an app perspective. Just speaking to some of the stuff that Mark was talking about, some of the challenges we face is not only acquiring data from all these disparate platforms, but as a transactional service, you don't have the regular usage that you would on an SVOD service, right? SVOD is all you can eat. You're gonna just keep coming back and watching content and driving trial. When you have to pay for each content, people tend to watch maybe 1 to 2 movies, but you don't have the behavior. You have a sparser data set. That means that the value you have to bleed out of your data is even more critical. And companies like Jump, I think, do a great job of surfacing that, provided you get them in early enough into your planning, right? I think the danger is waiting too long and making data an afterthought. You really have to build it into the fabric of your apps. I think that's enough of an intro, Mrugesh, if you want to kick it off and keep going.
Great. Thank you, Mark and David. So with that, we'll jump right into it in terms of our discussion topics. Again, in terms of the panelists, we're really representing sort of the user experience standpoint in building multi-device through Accedo. Jump is giving you the data strategies and data science side of things. And in row 8, of course, you have a customer who's sort of built out an OTT service and is serving hundreds of thousands of customers. So guys, with that, in terms of our first topic, when you imagine the word data, what are some of the things that actually come to mind in the OTT context? Mark, would you like to sort of give your perspective on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our view, data, quite frankly, these days is an asset to a business, just like cash or real estate. I mean, it's effectively, in any sort of subscription or customer-facing business, data is like the electricity. If you're not using it effectively, then you're not really running your business effectively. But one of the problems is customers are actually swamped with data. They have data from 7 different systems, and they might be telling them 7 different results or metrics about the same particular topic. So it's a blessing and a curse, but it's something that you really have to leverage. And if you're not leveraging it, then you're not really using the best asset you have, quite frankly, in running your business.
Great. Yeah, I think from my perspective, data really is a raw form of collection when it comes to the OTT services, but it's really how you translate that data into useful information, and perhaps from there, how can you use it in an autonomous nature to affect all types of different strategies, whether that's UX or content. But I think there is this notion that the more the data, the better, which I think is true in some cases. But as sort of David alluded to earlier, really it's about implementing a data strategy quite early in the development of your OTT service so that you can take advantage of data that's collected from day one. David, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think towards that end, I think what you said is, I think the planning is important, but you're never going to be able to anticipate anything. So the one recommendation I could give for a strategy is, in this data lake, you're creating a fossil record of all your data. Collect data you may never think you're going to need. Just log and create a fossil record of as much data as you can. You can always come back to it, but provided you have it, then you can decide how you want to manipulate it later. But the more data you collect, not even analyze, the better, because you can always go back to it.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. I think the more the better is a great axiom, and it doesn't matter if the data is noisy, if it's raw, if it's unstructured. As long as you have it kept somewhere, then you can use machine learning tools to leverage that and perform queries on it at some point in the future. And you just never know. But quite frankly, I mean, every customer touch point, from the subscription management service to the UX events to the CRM events to customer service tickets, quite frankly, can be effective in your go-to-market strategy and your customer retention strategy. So it doesn't really matter if it doesn't make sense today, or if it's raw, it's unlabeled or untagged, then we can definitely do something with it at some point.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, data is there to sort of prove theories around churn issues, issues affecting user engagement, but they can also reveal new use cases that you may not have thought out that data can actually solve for. And at the end of the day, it's really around improving or optimizing the OTT service from there.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Mark. I was just going to say, to your point, it's not an if. You'll need some data that you hadn't anticipated later because your business model changes or your requirements change. It's more of a when. And it's critical to be nimble enough, but you can't be nimble if you don't have that data somewhere. And as Mark said, you'll figure out how to interpret it with machine learning and these other tools that are coming online, because the tools are only getting better.
Yeah, very true, very true. And the final point I wanted to make on that, I think for a lot of the techniques, machine learning techniques that people want to apply to their data, they probably actually don't have enough, and more is always better. The way these models work is the more data they see, the better they get trained, the more accurate predictions they're able to make. So being able to, in some way, take your data and perhaps aggregate it with some more anonymized data around, similar markets or geographies or other SVOD services is super powerful to be able to deliver better results from your machine learning predictions. Because if you've got, I'd say, only 1 million subscribers, but you can actually tap into a data set that features 70 or 80 million or 100 million subscribers, that is going to give you much, much better results from your machine learning predictions, because it's just the nature of how it works. More data is always better.
Absolutely. Another hot topic is really around what types of data is being collected by OTT services, or what data should be collected by OTT services. From an Accedo perspective, we have a number of our B2B customers asking for all types of different user data to be collected, whether it's on the user behavior side of things, how folks are actually interacting with the application, how they sort of navigate the sitemap. But then, of course, from a content catalog perspective, our customers really want to understand what are the popular titles, how often are folks spending watching those titles, are those titles sticky? But there are also other interesting data points that are being collected. So David, I know from a row 8 perspective, one of the data collection strategies revolves around geo-based data collection. Do you want to sort of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The collection is the easy part. It's kind of how we manipulate it. We have a mechanism when you sign up, we basically get your zip code. We convert that to lat long. Our original business model was a premium VOD service where we were going to show movies to consumers in the home while they were still in theaters after about a 30-day lag. In order to accommodate the business models for the movie theaters, we could create basically an embargo zone of a certain radius around, kind of a trade area, if a movie theater was showing that movie, and basically block it out to that level of a granular within 1 to 3 miles to 5 miles, as opposed to an entire DMA like people do blackouts now for sports games. But we could also turn that if we could strike a deal with the movie theater, we could basically say, we're going to allow a consumer to view this movie within your trade zone, but we're going to give you a piece of the transaction. So this is a place where we're using data to try to move the needle into a new business model that doesn't exist yet. And it's those kind of innovative things that you need to figure out. That data is easily accessible. It's how you're going to leverage it to create and move the needle on these new business models.
Great, makes sense. Mark, from your perspective, does Jump sort of need all these various data inputs to sort of make successful predictions on aspects such as churn management or churn prediction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's really 4 broad classes of data that we like to look at. One is the front end, so all the UX events that you're capturing in Accedo One, for example, the navigation and the various interactions the user has. The type of device obviously is super important. We can drill down by, is it Apple TV? Is it Android? Is it iOS? That's really important that, you can actually track a user's journey throughout the day. They might start, in the evenings, they're watching it on their Roku or Apple TV device. Later that evening, they're watching it on the iPad. There's very interesting kind of customer journeys you can do. And that's the front end. Then the back end, I mean, there's obviously the content itself, the content catalog. So looking at different types of content performance, how that's measuring up versus, your entire population, understanding cohorts who really like different types of genres and programs. There's commerce events as well. So, the actual subscription and sign up of the user, when they're actually first getting onboarded to your service, and also that gives you the tenure of the customer as well. That's super important. And then there's the authentication as well and registration. So when they're first being onboarded, so that's those 4 classes of data are really fundamental to us. That allows us to give a really, really strong picture of what the consumer is doing, what cohorts they belong to, how to market to them and retain them, and how to keep them on and make predictions about tenure and how long they're going to stay on the service for.
Yeah, it seems to be that we're all hitting upon the same point, which is there's multiple sources of data, and all of which are quite important to build up the holistic picture of the user base and how they're consuming the OTT service. One of the strategies that we've developed at Accedo is running a workshop quite early in the OTT development process to actually identify what the base level of analytics would be for that customer. But then also identifying a host of different custom events that are unique to that OTT service that will provide them the right types of insights once they start doing some of the data modeling and understanding what they can actually affect in terms of churn management and user engagement. So it is a very important step in the process from our perspective to really sit down during the planning stages on OTT app development to really understand what needs to be collected. And then certainly there are various different data analytics SDKs, and some also enabled through API integration that allow us to facilitate those events to be captured in a useful way. And once the data is actually captured, it also then comes down to how it's being interpreted by the various stakeholders. So you of course have engineering stakeholders, QA folks, product folks, business stakeholders. So the actual reporting of the data to these various stakeholders is really important. You can, of course, rely on standard dashboards that some of these analytics providers have in their tool sets, but oftentimes it is important to actually customize it so that it's tailored to the correct stakeholder and they can interpret the data into sort of useful information. David,
Mrugesh, I just my only thought on this is this data you collect. You talked about it in looking at consumer acquisition, consumer churn, and all that is very important. Any of this data is also critical to your product roadmap, right? To prioritizing what your product roadmap is going to be, where you think you're going to see hits, and having some predictability there. It's critical that the stakeholders for coming in, that it prioritizes what you're going to do next, and where you're going to bring out additional resources, whether you're going to put off some other feature that you have on your product roadmap. But it does inform the product roadmap, or it should inform the product roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think a point you raised there, Mrugesh, about who's using this data and what they're doing with it. I think the way we've organized things at Jump is we have a set of dashboards that are pretty easy to understand, and you can drive actions around marketing and other things from the dashboard. So, marketing and product people can see exactly and understand how content is performing, how the customer lifetime value is performing against their metrics. But also, because we've taken a data lake approach, most larger OTT services now have some sort of analytics or data science team, and they're probably the people you sit down with at the start of the project. And for them, they can just do queries direct to the data lake using Tableau or SQL query if they want to do that as well. But for the main business outcomes that we're trying to drive, I think we have a really strong dashboard solution that the marketing folks can look at.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've personally liked about Jump is you guys aren't reliant on folks sending the data to you directly. You've been able to sort of come in even when they've established analytics collection through some of the third-party analytics players like Google Analytics, and then sort of being able to sort of siphon that onto your dashboard and almost sort of normalize it and make sense of it. So it is useful that you guys sort of have this 360 approach to collecting the data and then providing it in a holistic way on your dashboard.
Yeah, I mean, the data belongs to the customer first and foremost, especially there's very sensitive data there around subscribers and other things that, we never actually store it ourselves. It always belongs to the customer. That's really key to point out.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've often had during sort of due diligence processes with customers, them asking us if we store or collect any personally identifiable information through client-side analytics integrations, and the answer is no. It's sort of an important facet to the way we integrate and build out our apps that it doesn't actually allow us to store any personally identifiable information from the user. And that's sort of an important aspect, of course, within our borders in the US and Canada, but especially important in Europe, where GDPR obviously is a lot more stringent in terms of what you can and cannot do with data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. The next topic is really around how OTT services are leveraging data-driven strategies and how they're able to sort of optimize their services using those strategies. So there's various sort of perspectives here that we can share from the panel. David, maybe if you'd like to sort of start in terms of a row 8 perspective and how you're doing that today, or if you're doing that today.
No, we're definitely doing it. I think I alluded to it in our last point, and that's really for me as the Chief Technology Officer to really drive product roadmap. Everything that we need to do from a feature standpoint is going to be driven to, to drive the customer to transact or to transact more frequently or to convert the initial customer. So we try to do some innovative things on Roku where let me just talk about a challenge we had. We had a challenge where consumers we'd offer them a coupon. They'd have to transact on the web and then watch on Roku. People generally don't transact off platform and watch on another platform. That's kind of what we saw with behavior. So we had to come up with an innovative way to capture that user behavior, kind of auto coupon on the Roku platform and provide for them a seamless way where they didn't have to actually enter in a coupon. We had to use that data in order to implement this and to message properly within the app. And it was a challenge because of the limitations of the Roku platform.
Yeah, and that applies to if you wanted to buy something on Amazon, for example, on the Apple TV platform, you can't do that as well. I think that's probably going to become a bigger problem. Even though something like Apple TV or Roku will have all the services on their platform, they only want you to transact on theirs.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I think from an Accedo perspective, one strategy we've seen to be quite effective is the use of data to drive UX experimentation. So we've built into our Accedo One platform the ability to actually run A/B testing and even multivariate testing for the different device platforms. And essentially, by sort of using the conclusions from the testing, you can actually drive better engagement purely based on the way the layout of the application has been configured. So for example, we've run A/B tests with regard to onboarding experiences, perhaps as a specific segment of users who are younger and are much more in the know of how to leverage these types of applications. So, having a robust multi-screen onboarding experience might actually turn them off and is a bit annoying for them. But perhaps for an older crowd who might sort of be trying out the Roku or the Fire TV for the first time, it's actually quite important to give them a better onboarding experience. And that will actually lead to better search and discovery of your content and of course, lead to better KPIs with respect to video consumption and in-app sessions. So we find that the data is of course driving a lot of things with respect to content catalog, but also on the UX side of things, it can be used quite effectively. So using the data-driven strategies to drive both content recommendations and optimize on the UX, I think is quite key to OTT service success moving into the future. We're finding that even amongst some of the big tier 1 customers we have, some of them are only now getting to the experimentation on the UX side with respect to data. So it's not like this problem is focused only on the greenfield OTT services who are making their sort of initial forays into the video world. The problem, I think, is spread across the industry. Mark, David, do you guys sort of concur, or do you sort of see a different perspective on that?
Well, I mean, I think that the UX experimentation is excellent. I mean, I think the user sign-up flow, I think, is super important. Mrugesh, do you find that does it actually impact like the layout of the service, like where the various panels are and the rails and so forth? I mean, do you measure for that as well?
Absolutely. I think with respect to any of the UI, we look at it in a very modular way. So, being able to understand, content trails, even nuances around aspect ratio, all of that can feed right back into the experimentation, right? Having cinematic content like row 8 might mean you actually want a less is more type approach to the home screen, as an example, because you really want to hone in on the featured piece of content. But
Yeah.
other services who are much more about search and discovery and leaving that up to the user. Certainly, the sort of the content rail approach and experimenting with that becomes an important sort of facet of the data-driven strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that's the core of our personalization and recommendation strategy is surfacing the right content, effectively in real time when the consumer's there. So, we obviously get great data around the genres and content types that they're fans of, and we want to make sure that that is front and center when they have finished watching something and we're surfacing what to watch next. And that's all through a dynamic UX experience. I mean, that's the only way to do it. If we all logged on to any of our OTT services today, we'd all see different, whether it's Netflix or Row 8 or anything else, Disney Plus, we'd all see a different set of content just personalized for us. And I think that's so important. And that really means you need a flexible UX to do that.
Yeah, and you need something intelligent enough to read the data that you're collecting, right? To do that in real time, because a miss means a difference in potentially churn or non-conversion. So I think it is critical to put together a tool set that's going to make good and sound recommendations for those consumers, or the interface, not just recommendations on a movie, but actually present the interface that's going to be appealing to the customer.
Yeah, I think with your service, David, every time a customer logs in, it's a moment of truth, right? Because they're either going to buy or they're not, versus an SVOD service where we've got their money for this month, so they can watch something or not. But you need to position exactly what they want to watch, right? That's really, really critical.
Yeah, that's correct. So we live or die by, if they come in, they can't find what they watch quickly. If they don't see what they want probably within the first 3 clicks, we probably lost them for that evening.
Wow. Okay. Huh. Is that's the data you've got? You've got like a 3-click window really to get them sold for that?
No, what we've done is we've tried to mine and keep them on a little longer. Initially, we've changed the interface a little bit, and we've added a lot more movies. As Mrugesh knows, our original interface was meant to house about 60 movies. I think we have about 1,000 movies right now. So we need to make that accessible to the consumer to let them know what's there. So we've kind of surfaced swim lanes. We've on Roku, we've added search from the main button, and we've added you may also like, which is if you go to a movie details page, you will see other movies. All that is done programmatically, recommended based on your viewing history, right? So what we've tried to do is increase the probability that within the clicks you're going to be there. First, we try to extend the number of clicks for your lifetime. Second is maximizing the clicks that you're actually making when you're on the service.
Yeah. So a question from the crowd who's joined. And I think this is ties into maybe David's perspective, but what do you think is the most relevant thing in terms of a new OTT service launching? So David, of course, you've gone through this, but was it really around content, of course, or apps, the data, the marketing, a mix of them? How would you sort of, if we put a gun to your head and you had to sort of pick one thing that you had to really hone in on when you launched the OTT service, what was it?
Well, I would say it's hard to pull apart any one of those because they're all basically pillars for the foundation of the service. But for me, underlying all kind of data cuts through all of those, right? Whether it's the app, whether it's the marketing. And I can't emphasize enough putting together the strategy as early as possible, because the data sources you guys have identified here, they're additional data sources, right? Social media, CRM, email marketing, and trying to drive these kind of cross-platform, right? Finding these unique identifiers. So when you said identifying what data you want to do, doing it intelligently, I think it's about trying to figure out what that unifying piece of data is. So no matter where that consumer is, you can track that behavior and kind of marry that data somewhere. And whether it's video usage data, app usage data, where they're transacting, where they're not converting, right, where they're abandoning a transaction. This is it's a lot of data, but your data strategy, and I think the second piece of advice is don't spend too much time on the planning, because you're not going to anticipate everything. Just your job is really to collect as much data as you can in a fossil record, and then figure out how to analyze it once the business develops.
Absolutely. Another question that came through was around, how does one actually understand the effect of an A/B test before running the test in a real environment? It is a great question, and of course, without real user perspective, the data can be quite skewed in terms of who you ask to participate in a controlled environment. I think that there are actually more effective strategies than using A/B testing in a non-production environment. So actually doing deep user research is probably one area. So you can actually set up interviews with target segments, understand the use of the application in sort of a controlled environment, or even an unmoderated environment. There's lots of great tools out there, such as User Zoom, if you've come across that tool, to leverage that type of use case. But really the A/B tests and multivariate tests provide a lot of valuable insight once you actually have the real users in the wild, and you can actually look at multiple geographies and multiple demographics, and that will really feed into the right types of conclusions. Mark, do you sort of have a perspective? Because we do sort of collaborate with Jump to sort of run some of these tests.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got a big enough subscriber base, you can do it with your live audiences, do it with a subset, which is what Netflix has done for years, I think, is A/B test various UX modifications by using real data. But I mean, as always, you need a big enough data set to draw conclusions, and sometimes perhaps in the wild is the only place to get it. But at the end of the day, you also have to quantify the change in UX, and with David's service, it's very easy. They subscribe or they don't. With they transact, they purchase the premium VOD or they don't. With other subscription services, they have targets around utilization, right? So can I keep you on the service for an extra 6 minutes a day, or an extra 2 hours a month? And that kind of utilization drives retention and drives customer lifetime value. So as long as you can make all the UX changes you want, as long as it's properly quantified in terms of whatever metric you need. And I love David's 3-click analogy. Like, as long as they're getting around and clicking and making the transaction, then that's great. And for other SVOD services, I think it's really the tenure, the amount of minutes you spend in the service, looking around and watching video.
So it's taken us about 40 minutes to bring up Netflix, which I'm quite proud of that. So it's a good job to my fellow panelists. But Mark, now that you have brought up Netflix, one interesting thing I think they've done with respect to A/B testing and sort of machine learning, they've actually taken to doing A/B tests on the actual image thumbnails that are displayed to the users. So they've done a lot of great research, which is publicly available, around how the choice of thumbnails can affect click-through behavior. And they honed in on sort of emotive intelligence. So it's the idea that whether it's a single person in a shot versus a group in a shot, or the actual expression of the people in the shot, can actually affect the click-through behavior. And one of the interesting conclusions they found is a polarizing character is typically going to affect better click-through behavior. And typically a villainous character versus a hero character would lead to click-through. So we've actually taken a page out of that and started collaborating with the AWS recognition platform, and offer this type of image recognition and generation of thumbnail approach to our customers, so that they can actually leverage it for A/B testing purposes, with the idea that even a second shaved off of click-through will of course lead to a significant impact if you're thinking about millions of users consuming hundreds of millions of minutes of video content every month.
Yeah, I mean that's a great machine learning project. The image content processing and recognition. I think, to do that well, I think the AWS service is fantastic. Especially if you're not only have 1,000 pieces of content, but 10,000 or 100,000 pieces of content, all the different permutations of image and thumbnail, and the various image sizes and the various platforms. So what works on an iPhone in that aspect ratio may be different to what works on a large LCD TV. I mean, it's super interesting, and one of the great uses of machine learning, and that it applies to video as well. I mean, just because many of the services have instant trailer now as well. So picking the right trailer, not just the right thumbnail, is super important. And taking it a step further, you can actually build the right kind of trailer with optimized with machine learning and image processing.
Yeah, absolutely. So transitioning to sort of our next topic, and maybe David, you can kick this off, but what do you think is your biggest challenge? We've talked about a few different things, whether it's multiple data sources, legislation, perhaps data science proficiency that you rely on in-house or with firms like Jump. But what do you think is really the biggest challenge facing you and OTT services at large?
That's a good question. I would say the biggest challenge is unifying the data. Again, it's the unification data. It's not the collection of data across these disparate systems and services and organizations. It's trying to find who's the owner within the organization, who's actually going to be able to digest it and provide a reasonable digestion. Obviously, you can say whatever you want with data. It's trusting that group, kind of making them kind of their own group and funding that group properly to make sure they have the tools, access to the data, and can feed that back to every stakeholder within your organization. Nothing can be more critical than to make them kind of a standalone. They're not a marketing function. They're not a development function. They're not even a business function. They're kind of adjunct. It's really critical to make them arm's length to all those. So they don't serve any master. Their master is to serve the service and their customers.
I think that's a great idea, having a data governance strategy, because it does come from so many different places and functionally probably has several different owners. The people who own the subscriber management system are different to the people who are capturing the UX events through Google Analytics or through quality of service like Conviva. So you have all these different owners in the organization. Having someone responsible for unifying that, governing it, making sure that it is eventually tagged or labeled or optimized correctly is really critical. And it comes down to I think in-house resources. So you have someone doing that function. Whether you'll have a data science team and someone actually building models really depends on, I guess, the size of the organization. Most I guess even medium to large services or smaller services have some sort of data science function. It just depends on how it's resourced, and a lot of discussions people are having internally is buy versus build. Like, can I actually build the models and have enough data to train them so that it surfaces a meaningful business impact, and that's really the question. More often than not, unless you are incredibly well resourced, then you won't have that sort of capability to do in-house, and you will have to even just from getting a large data set, go outside the organization to help you build that stuff.
Yeah, Mark, I guess toward that end, I would say it would be hubris to think that you're going to be able to solve all these issues with yourselves. There are a number of good partners that we've leveraged, including Accedo, including our OVP, and we've had several conversations with Jump as a transactional service that's a sparser data set, and we have to overcome our own challenges, but there's no way you're going to be able to solve this yourself. You have to lean on partners that are available out there in the field who are experts in this. You need to be experts in delivering the best possible experience to your customer, but in interpreting data, there's a number of great services out there that you can leverage.
Yeah, I think we all sort of agree on the resourcing aspect, right? The idea that the average OTT service can build a data science team in-house and start making sense of it, really detracts from, of course, their core focus, which is, acquiring great content to get to the users and working with partners to sort of enable the video ecosystem, including the UX around that. So, we've had even tier one customers who've been working with us for upwards of 5 years on building out the OTT services, iterating it on it, building in all types of new data sources. And at the end of the day, they've got a minimal analytics team in-house and are not really using the data, making sense of it. So, for me, it's really not around the collection of the data. I think there's a lot of great tools now that allow to do that very, very easily. But it's the use, as we've kind of alluded to. You really need to leverage partners and sort of come up with a good strategy that you can focus on a lot more. We are getting a lot more questions from the crowd, so I'll try to speed things along since we're 10 minutes away from the end. But in terms of the final topic we were going to discuss today, it's really around what is utopia when it comes to data-driven strategies. So perhaps if you're looking 2 or 3 years out, and as the OTT market continues to evolve, what is the benchmark that everyone should shoot for? Mark, would you like to kick this off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the utopia in terms of data analysis is having true artificial intelligence, making a meaningful impact in your business. And I'm talking end to end. So everything from content sourcing, doing your licensing deals based on, historical several years worth of content usage, and being able to strike the most effective content deals. Talking about content acquisition, so taking that data and generating automatically the right kind of acquisition campaigns and the right kind of channels to the right sort of people. And then making the right kind of predictions around customer lifetime retention and churn as well. And done in such a way that it's almost not a black box. I mean, all the data is getting fed into the data lake and people can see it, but it's running in such a way that if I engage in this action as recommended by the system, then I know I'm going to have this impact. I know I will acquire this set of customers. I know I'll reduce churn by 15%. I know all these outcomes will happen in a really predictable way. I mean, that's really the end result for artificial intelligence in general. I think to get there, we still have to spend a little bit more time, building models, and there's still going to be a human judgment element, of course, because you still have to, come up with campaigns. You still have to develop pricing strategy. There's still a lot of human trial and error. There's human curation and editorial of content. But, eventually I think it's a much more automated process. And so frees people up like David to focus on building the best service, and getting, going and acquiring the best content and innovating on the business models.
Mrugesh, my thought on this utopia, I think that, for now, Netflix is a thought leader. You talked about, them showing the different artwork, potentially a different trailer. Years ago, it was the ordering of a title or the ordering of a swim lane. I actually think now they're creating dynamic names for swim lanes, not only the ordering of it, but actually to resonate with you. So similar to the image, how they're phrasing it. So they have a number of names and they're going to serve the one that they think is going to get you to click. Where I really see the holy grail is using all the stuff that Mark just spoke about and actually driving potentially a different UX for a consumer, having a number of ones, and it's going to drive them, not just the presentation of the titles or the artwork within the UX, but maybe a fundamentally different UX to consumers and get them to drive. Now, it's very costly, but if you're doing it dynamically, automatically, and using machine learning, you can just do it programmatically.
Yeah, absolutely. If I think about the user experiences for some of the social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram, at the end of the day, for every single user, it's very much a blank canvas approach, right? The the UX that I have, the content that I have is completely tailored to me. And I definitely see the OTT services evolving to that. So, being able to actually use data to drive autonomous change, both on UX and on content across the multi-device ecosystem, I think is something that is going to become staple in a couple of years. Today, very much the sitemap of most applications is dictated by the user experience paradigms that device platform lays out to application developers like ourselves. But a lot more of them are providing the flexibility to really define the UX that will drive better engagement on a segment level. So through folks like Jump, who are able to help identify very nuanced user segments across all the consumers, that in itself will start driving the effectiveness and ROI on these sort of data-driven autonomous strategies on the UX. So that really, for me, is where we're going to go in a few years. We do have maybe one or two questions that we can take on before we wave goodbye to everyone. And perhaps we've touched upon this quite a bit, but what would be your advice on how to start with a data-driven solution for any company? Mark, if you had to kind of surmise maybe in the one or two most important ways to start this, what would that be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think starting is a classic problem in data science, quite frankly. It's called the cold start problem, right? So if you don't have any data, there's nothing to analyze and train and build your models. And you might have to be in business for 6 or 9 months to actually get enough data to do that. So I think that, working with a partner who can actually leverage some pre-existing data to give you a running start. I mean, obviously your service will be unique with its own content and business models, but overcoming that cold start problem is super, super hard to do. But on your own, I mean, you need to leverage some other databases to be able to do it. On data sets, I should say. And
David, if I guess you had to start it all over again in terms of incepting row 8, what would have been the way you would have started your data-driven strategy, if it's any different to how you actually started it?
I would have thrown out everything I assumed I knew about what I needed and gone after a much wider swath of data. Basically, I think the planning initially is just capture as much data as you can and do your best to anticipate base level of what you think you're going to want to interpret, and let the business kind of naturally drive how you think you're going to want to analyze it later, because there's no way you can really anticipate that.
Great. I think with that perspective, we can probably wrap things up. It's been fantastic collaborating with yourselves, David and Mark. I think the perspective on data science and running an OTT service, coupled with the Accedo perspective in UX, hopefully was valuable to all of the participants here today. If there's a last word that each of you would like to leave, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, I think we'll be wishing everyone happy holidays, and hopefully we'll see everyone at the Consumer Electronics Show.
Happy holidays. Thanks for having me, Mark and Mrugesh. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. We'll hopefully, see you at CES. Happy holidays.
Cheers, everyone who's joined, and good afternoon for North American folks, and good morning for some of the West Coast folks, and good night for everyone in Europe. Cheers, everyone. Take it easy.
Cheers. Thanks.